A story of strength, speed, wisdom, and the silent truths that only the warriors themselves truly understood. Early encounters and contrasting philosophies. Long before the cameras captured headlines and the world debated who was superior, Bruce Lee and Joe Louis shared a common space in Los Angeles, in gyms that smelled of sweat, chalk, and determination. These weren't the glamorous arenas of Hollywood or the roaring stadiums of professional boxing. They were small, intimate spaces where martial arts were practiced not for fame, but for mastery. The walls were lined with mirrors, the floor covered in mats that had absorbed decades of effort, bruises, and perseverance. Joe Louis, already a titan in the ring, carried the aura of experience and raw power. Every move he made spoke of countless hours spent conditioning his body, refining his techniques, and building an instinctive understanding of combat. His punches were heavy, precise, and calculated. His kicks thundered like rolling storms. Fighters who faced him learned quickly that sheer strength and aggression could dominate a match if wielded correctly. He was not just a man of brute force. He was a strategist, reading opponents in milliseconds and responding with explosive efficiency. Bruce Lee, in contrast, approached combat from a different vantage point. Though smaller in stature, he carried an intensity and fluidity that could disarm any opponent. Speed, timing, and adaptability were his tools. Each motion he executed was deliberate, each strike precise, almost imperceptibly fast. To watch Bruce move was to witness physics applied to the human body, an embodiment of kinetic energy turned into art. Beyond the physical, Lee was also a philosopher of martial arts, a man who questioned the rigid structures of traditional fighting and sought to integrate principles from various disciplines. He believed that combat was not about who hit hardest, but who understood the rhythm of the encounter and could adapt instantaneously. When they first met, it was clear that this would not be a typical sparring relationship. Bruce would circle the heavy bag, hands loose, eyes sharp, moving like a shadow, flicking jabs that blurred against the light. Joe Louis, accustomed to dominating with power, tested every punch, every kick, every instinct against this new, unconventional style. The contrast was stark. Louis representing unrelenting force, Lee representing precision and strategy. It was a living demonstration of two approaches to mastery, both valid, both formidable, yet fundamentally different. Their training sessions were intense, almost ritualistic. Gloves met pads with rhythmic thuds. Shins clashed against padded legs, and the air filled with the sounds of exertion and concentration. Bruce would dart in and out, a flash of motion that forced Louis to abandon predictable patterns. "See, Joe," Bruce would say, his voice calm yet commanding, "it's not just strength, it's timing, speed, and awareness." Louis would counter with brute force, pounding the heavy bag, testing his own limits, shaking the chains that held the bag in place. But it was more than a physical contest. It was a meeting of philosophies. Louis valued the tangible, the proven, the tested. To him, victories were earned in the crucible of competition, under the pressure of referees, crowds, and stakes that mattered. Bruce, meanwhile, pursued the abstract, the principle, the idea that combat could be elevated to an art form that transcended mere competition. This difference created both tension and respect. They admired each other's abilities, but privately questioned each other's approach. Outside the gyms, their reputations began to grow. Louis became known worldwide for his knockout power and championship titles, while Bruce Lee gained attention in Hollywood and martial arts circles as an innovator, a thinker, and a man whose speed and vision seemed almost otherworldly. The world started to notice the contrast, and inevitably, comparisons began. Who was the better fighter? The stronger, more experienced champion, or the agile, philosophical martial artist redefining the boundaries of the craft? Even in these early encounters, a silent challenge existed. Bruce's movements were calculated and deliberate, but also creative, unpredictable. Louis' strikes were definitive and powerful, yet required adjustments to counter Bruce's fluidity. It was in these moments that both men began to understand that mastery was not only about physical ability, but also about understanding oneself, the opponent, and the very essence of combat itself. By the end of these sessions, bruised and exhausted, both men would bow, acknowledge each other's skill, and smile. There was admiration beneath the surface, a recognition that they were both pursuing something greater than victory, the pursuit of true mastery. And yet, beneath the mutual respect, seeds of doubt were planted. Louis wondered if Bruce's style could withstand real combat pressure, while Bruce pondered whether sheer force alone could ever truly dominate a world guided by adaptability, timing, and insight. It was in these private, sweat-drenched hours that the story began. Not with a headline, not with an insult, but with the raw, unfiltered essence of martial arts. A story that would later erupt into a public debate over skill, philosophy, and respect. A debate sparked by a single, provocative sentence. Bruce Lee is overrated. The statement that shook the martial arts world. The gym had barely cooled from the echoes of Joe Louis' powerful strikes when the question arrived, casual in its timing but explosive in its consequences. A reporter stepped forward, notebook in hand, eyes flicking between the two men who had already carved their reputations into martial arts history. "What do you think of Bruce Lee?" the reporter asked, a question seemingly simple, yet laden with potential to ignite controversy. Louis paused only a fraction of a second, a brief hesitation in the rhythm of his breathing, and then leaned casually on the ropes. The sweat from his grueling workout dripped down his forehead, yet his gaze remained steady, unwavering. With a calm yet resolute voice that carried across the gym, he stated what would become one of the most talked about remarks in martial arts history. Bruce Lee is overrated. The impact of those words was immediate. Cameras flashed, pens raced across paper, and for a moment, the gym seemed to hold its collective breath. In a world where reputation, skill, and respect were everything, Louis' statement was a gauntlet thrown down. It was not just an opinion. It was a challenge, a provocation, and a spark that would ignite debates across continents. Within hours, The quote spread faster than any punch Lewis had thrown. Newspapers splashed the headline across the front pages. Joe Lewis calls Bruce Lee overrated. Martial arts magazines dissected every syllable, framing it as a confrontation between two titans of the fighting world. Fans and practitioners took sides, debating fervently in gyms, schools, and homes. Some sided with Lewis, insisting that Bruce Lee's fame was more about spectacle than substance. Others defended Bruce, pointing to his unmatched speed, creativity, and philosophical approach that had humbled every training partner he encountered. Meanwhile, Bruce Lee remained silent. He did not respond immediately to the storm brewing outside. Reporters called, cameras waited, and whispers filled the corridors of martial arts schools. Students speculated endlessly. Was he ignoring the insult, or was he preparing something far more profound than a simple rebuttal? The silence itself became part of the narrative, as dramatic and powerful as any strike thrown in the ring. In the backyard of his California home, Bruce's answer began to take shape. Not through words, but through movement. Beneath the warm sun, he trained with focus that bordered on meditation. Every strike against the heavy bag was deliberate. Each kick measured, each jab precise and controlled. Sweat poured from his body, glinting in the sunlight like molten metal, and his breathing was sharp and rhythmic, echoing the discipline and intensity of his practice. Friends and students watched, a mix of awe and concern on their faces. "Say something, Bruce," one finally urged, but Lee's response was not verbal. His fists and feet spoke volumes. Each combination he executed was more than a display of physical skill. It was a demonstration of philosophy in motion, the private confrontation, and the power of one sentence. Weeks passed after Joe Lewis' controversial statement, and the world continued to speculate. Headlines screamed, debates raged in gyms, and fans picked sides. Yet Bruce Lee remained silent to public. But the storm brewing outside masked a quieter, more intense preparation within. Behind the walls of his home gym, Lee's response was taking shape. Not in words or interviews, but in deliberate, disciplined action. Every movement was measured, every strike an expression of focus, precision, and philosophy. Finally, a decision was made. Bruce arranged a private meeting with Joe Lewis, away from the glare of reporters and the frenzy of cameras. This was to be a meeting not a spectacle, but of understanding. Only the two fighters and a few trusted students were present. The gym was dimly lit, the scent of leather, sweat, and anticipation thick in the air. The sound of pads being struck echoed softly, each crack punctuating the tension that hung like a tangible weight. And that's the story behind one of the most legendary encounters in martial arts history. A clash not of fists, but of philosophy. Bruce Lee showed the world that true mastery isn't about who hits hardest or who wins the trophies. It's about discipline, restraint, and the wisdom in the fight before it begins. Joe Lewis, one of the greatest fighters of his time, learned firsthand that strength alone isn't everything. So, who do you think was a better fighter? Bruce Lee with his unmatched philosophy and speed, or Joe Lewis with his raw power and championship experience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the world of martial arts legends. Remember, mastery isn't just about fighting. It's about understanding yourself.